So welcome everybody to our webinar today. We will be discussing an introduction to technology terms, and we'll specifically be looking at data analytics, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. We will be joined by three expert speakers. We have Julien Nyambal. He is a data scientist and software developer at Intellect. We've got Kerryn Gammie, which is a data scientist in the AI team at Absa Group. And then we've got Thabelo Mmbengeni. He is the Chief Technology Officer at FinChatbot. Before we begin, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Krystle Hastings, and I am the Head of Marketing at FinChatbot, and I'll be your host for this webinar. Our agenda, before we start, I'm just going to do an introduction about who we are and why we have these webinars. Then we'll jump straight into the panel discussion with our expert speakers. And then we'll end off with a Q&A at the end and give thanks in a conclusion. Just to mention, when we do have our discussion, we're going to launch a few polls during the first 3 questions. So please feel free to provide your answers and we can discuss them after each question. It will be quite an interesting result to discuss. And also you'll see that there's a little panel on the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions, just click on the Q&A button, leave your questions there, and we'd be happy to address those at the end of the webinar. So to tell you a bit about the meetups or these webinars that we have, so we started these actually on a platform called Meetup. We've grown our Meetup group from 0 in 2019 to 1,902 members and looking to grow it a lot further. The name of our group is Johannesburg AI, Machine Learning and Conversational AI. This meetup was started by FinChatbot and is supported by French Tech. The purpose of having these webinars is to try and create a community. It's quite a broad community of entrepreneurs, tech enthusiasts, engineers, investors, corporates, and students. So essentially what we're trying to do is build an ecosystem. We like to engage on topics such as entrepreneurship, startup life, tips, deep learning AI, chatbots, and conversational AI. We also host hackathons. We hosted one last year, which was really, really cool. We developed a gamification solution for the insurance industry. And then we can also do meet and pitch sessions, getting involved with investors and entrepreneurs to help entrepreneurs grow their business. We have been joined by some incredible speakers, and you can see we've got some repeat speakers today, which is super awesome. We've been joined by Natalie, Amira, Rossetti, Alex, and today we will be joined again by Kerryn and Julien. So thank you so much for joining us again. We are very thankful to have you. And thank you for Thabelo for joining us too. Looking forward to our discussion. To tell you a bit about FinChatbot, what we do is we create conversational AI solutions for the financial services industry. We were started in 2016 and are based in Johannesburg. And just very recently, we have started to expand the business into Europe. So that's extremely exciting. And we'll be also looking to expand the business into West Africa. These meetups are also supported by French Tech. What French Tech does is they help to build an ecosystem of entrepreneurs and investors to grow the entrepreneurial space in South Africa and working with a lot of different French connections to help accomplish that goal. This is the team that helps make these webinars possible. This is the FinChatbot team, and I'm very excited to show them to you. We're growing quite quickly, so these faces, this is going to be a very full board very soon. And before I jump into the panel discussion with our speakers, I'd like to leave you with a quote, which I quite enjoyed, and I think it's super relevant to this talk. So the quote is, if we have data, let's look at data. If all we have are opinions, let's go with mine. And this is a quote by Jim Barksdale. And what's really interesting about this is if you have data, you can make intelligent and informed decisions that are based on facts and statistics and intelligence. And if you don't have that data, very often we assume we know what our customers want, which may not always be the right assumption. And before I hand over, I'd like to say thank you to everybody who has joined us today. I really appreciate your support. Thank you to our speakers. If you'd like to know more about FinChatbot or French Tech, or would just like to have a chat with us, you can visit our website. You can also email me at hello@finchatbot.com, and I would love to engage with you. Fantastic. So let's begin our exciting panel discussion today. We're going to start with Julien. And if Julien, if you could first do an introduction to yourself and who you are, and if you could answer our first question, which is, can you tell us about data analytics and big data? Over to you, Julien.
You can see my slides, right?
Yes, got you.
Perfect. Okay, cool. About me, I'm basically Julien, a software developer at Intellect. I basically do data science as well as data engineering whenever needs be. So I'm currently working on a project that involves a lot of data movement and all those stuff. Other than that, I just like playing tennis. That's all for me. That's basically my hobby outside my work. So today, I will be speaking a bit about data analytics, AI, and ML, and just a very quick overview on how we use all of those in the real world. So,
I can see that.
Perfect. Then I'll go with the time that I had. So in terms of data analytics, the nice thing with that is like today we have a lot of data coming in, and I'll take the example with the banks. And the banks are the entities that do have a lot of data. And those are very nice examples if you have to speak about big data and data analytics. So there are three terms that we need to understand, mostly when we speak about big data, in terms of varieties. Like, as we all know, we have multiple sorts of data sources. It can be API endpoints, it can be Excel files, it can be Power files, it can be anything, SQL tables. And now, that set of files, they basically are big enough, right? They usually, in terms of, you can go in terms of tera, gigabyte, or petabyte, depending on what amount of data you have. For example, I remember running one day, we were supposed to do analytics on users of a month, and then it was some terabytes of data, and we needed to deal with it. Okay, so now, given that we have all of those entities, every roles in this particular universe, we would like to do something with it. And now I can use the quote of Krystle earlier, we have a lot of data, then we can use it. So when we use it, we need to transform. It's like you know, we have our SQL database, for instance, that's what we all know. We have our Mongo database, we have our texts, our tweets, everything that the people are using. And then again, I'll go back to bank. The bank, they use all of that to basically have a better customer service. But then it's coming at once in a single day. You can take it as an example, the number of swipes that a user does on daily basis. It's a lot. Now we need to transform that into something that we can use. And at the end of the day, we have a very big broad of things, and we'll end up, I'm giving you now the end of the story. We end up with a dashboard. And I know most of the executive people, they like to look at dashboards because it tells them that in Johannesburg, for example, with the different set of data we have, it can be SQL database coming from TransUnion, it can be plain text coming from Facebook, it can be CSV coming from some of the branches, and then they all come at once in a single server, and then they get extracted, transformed, and then we have a Power BI dashboard or a Thabelo dashboard that basically tells you, okay, maybe not in America, but in South Africa, what is going on. On the other side of the data processing and the data transformation, we have the machine learning component, which is now growing up in a lot of industries, again in the banks, they mostly use it to create new products for the clients. And that's very interesting. With the amount of data we get, we can better understand the user behavior. All right. The next slide is basically a very simple use case of how, again, I'm dealing with the banks and how the banks are going towards building some customer product for the different users. Here we have some retailers here, Pick and Pay, Nando's, and all this stuff. I'm not doing any advertisement of these guys, but then they're all sending in data to, or let's say they all have point of services where the users are actually buying stuff. What do we do? So we basically have all of these data, right? They can come, like I said, in any different format, like the one we can actually see. And given those formats, we have to now send it back to the users to do some pre-processing, and then you have different packages and libraries that do that. One of them is you have the scikit-learn, you have Power BI that do everything. You can use anything, any particular library, or Orange, or however it's being called in English, for that data processing. And after that, you have the banks that actually process the data. Okay. So the bank on the other side, this is the very last one. And the bank on the other side are the consumers one. They basically aggregate everything from everyone because each and every bank has a point of service somewhere. And they basically have the different transactions that they receive from the different users. It gets aggregated by some data engineers and data scientists who basically get the data, process the data, and then it's like, okay, you user A, because you buy too much from Gammie and Spa, this is what our machine learning predicted for you. So that's basically how I'm saying this, and at the end of the day, the shareholders or the different big deciders of the bank can now say, okay, we would like, from a dashboard that we receive from the different type of data, we would like to go in maybe West Africa, or we would like to go in India or wherever, because the user footprint is basically bigger that side. We spend more on our product, then it will make sense for us to go that side. So in a nutshell, this is basically what I would like to tell you about this in very quick 5 minutes about data analytics and a bit of machine learning and data science. That's for me. Handing over to you, Krystle.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julien. That's really interesting. And I think it's not always clear the difference between data analytics and big data. I think, can you tell us a little bit about that? You know, what is the difference between data and big data?
Okay, basically in a minute or two, data, you can store fundamentally, by definition on internet, data is just an entity that you can store in a hard drive of a computer. Your music, your files, anything that's small enough to hold in your computer. But when you say big data, you have, first of all, something that cannot fit directly in single machines. So we're speaking about storing stuff in what we call cluster, or a set of computers that can basically break the data down and then store it in an organized manner, right? Now, when we're speaking about big data analytics, it's just a matter of saying we have a lot of data split around every places in the world, and then we like to do something in the centralized place, like a machine learning model or even a Power BI dashboard. Running that in a single computer will be very, very, very difficult. So we would like to use big data tools like Hadoop, or everything from the Hadoop stack, like Spark and Hive and things like that, to make sure that we have access to that big data in terms of petabytes, and then we can process it in a distributed manner so that we have a result that can suit the need of a little business. So it's just a matter of how we store it and how we process it, and mostly the size of the data.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Julien. And just to give the results from the poll, it seems that the audience's favorite big data manipulation tool, 46% said Python, and 32% said Excel. So I think that kind of, that way of manipulating the data, a lot of people are still using Excel, which is quite interesting. And I think, awareness of those different tools and sort of learning those different tools is quite a big piece of getting further and understanding data. Thank you so much. And I think we will move to Kerryn. Kerryn, can you give us a brief introduction into yourself? And can you give us a brief introduction to artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning?
Sure, cool, thank you so much. So hi everyone, I'm Kerryn. I am a data scientist in the artificial intelligence team at Absa. My academic background is in philosophy and economics, so humanities baby for life. I spent quite a few, well, not quite a few years, a little bit of time in credit risk. So yeah, and I'm in AI. So cool, without further ado, let me share this bad boy. Vibes. Cool. All right. So I guess what is AI? So I like to think of it as the sort of love child between computer science and statistics. And if you want to just add some spice, then you have like a nice MacBook to do all the heavy lifting for you. But really what it is a combination of schools of thoughts across cognitive sciences, computer sciences, ethics, which is definitely not something that gets enough airtime. But generally speaking, it is a computer or a machine's proximity to being human. And so typically we can define this in two types. So one refers to the action. So we have weak AI or narrow tasks. So it can do explicitly programmed functions. So like, optimizing certain things. And then we get strong AI, which is something that is like artificial general intelligence, which is the ability to think like a human or perform humanistic sort of tasks. Second to that is the idea of functions, right? So type 2 things. So the things that are in bold are kind of like the frontiers that we've sort of reached in terms of our technological development. So we've already sort of nailed reactive machines, which is that we can't use past information for future actions. And those were very sort of like trivial kind of the first iteration of computers and intelligence that we were able to embed in machines. We've also managed to do limited memory, which is like using past information for future decisions, so i.e. Siri and all those sexy tools. And then the thing that we're currently working on, which again refers to this AGI or artificial general intelligence, is using theory of mind, which is really just using neuroscience and cognitive sciences to try and understand like what it is to be human, what it is to think, and then try and, I guess, encode that into a machine. And then I guess the next thing, which is sort of the natural progression thereof, is self-awareness. So how do you think about consciousness? How do you then, again, encode consciousness into a machine in a way that is meaningful and hopefully altruistic? And then you have these mechanisms or tools, and that's essentially all that machine learning and its subsequent subsets are tools for enacting AI. So we've got machine learning, we've got natural language processing, robotics, et cetera, et cetera. And so if we were to sort of like create like a Venn diagram of this, so we've got AI, which is, broadly this field of computer science and statistics that enables machines to do human tasks. That also then includes like normative ethics and things that sort of create the foundations of AI thinking. And then we have machine learning, which is one of the tools or mechanisms or applications of AI, which just uses structured data to make decisions without human intervention. And then we have deep learning, which I like to think of it as almost like an onionized version of machine learning, because it has multiple layers of algorithms that sort of enable deeper interpretations of both structured and also unstructured data. And then this isn't explicitly part of the talk, but reinforcement learning, I think, is probably one of the most invigorating disciplines that we're coming to learn and understand. And this is, again, has, I guess, overlaps between deep learning and machine learning, but essentially it enables this machine or computer to learn sort of dynamically by adjusting its actions in order to maximize some sort of outcome or reward. And then just specifically on machine learning, sort of what it is and what it isn't. So it is absolutely magical because you can do so many cool, sexy things. What it is not, however, is it's not magic, right? And in an effort to sort of instantiate this, you can sort of have all these constituent parts of like a sushi, right? And you can build this really cool and intricate machine to create you this wonderful sushi that gives you insights and cool things. What you can't do, however, is take those same bits of sushi bits or data in this instance and create a mermaid, right? Like that is far outside of the like technological stratosphere that makes things possible. Okay, again, machine learning relies on data. So if you give it garbage data, you are going to get a garbage output, but now it looks kind of sexy and sounds kind of sexy just because you've attached the term machine learning. What you're not going to get is you're not going to get golden insights, right? Like that, again, is very much outside of the capabilities of machine learning and AI in general. So yeah, so that's my little spiel on what AI is and what machine learning and deep learning is. Your English is tough. Yeah, thank you. That's it for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Kerryn. I always love your animated slides. They are fantastic.
Thank you.
Always wonderful. So we did launch a poll while you were talking where we asked where AI plays its most prolific role. And most people voted that it would be in corporate. And then we kind of equal between academia and government. So if you could tell us a little bit about that, you know, why you think people would vote that AI plays its most prolific role in corporate.
Sure. So as someone who is in corporate, I'm inclined to agree, but maybe for the wrong reasons. I guess that's where the money and the drive is, right? Corporates are obviously, you know, it's a capitalist system, so everyone needs to do things better, faster, in an innovative sort of fashion, in which case these are platforms or spaces where money gets, money is a thing, in which case you're able to develop things quite quickly and you're able to develop things in a much more collaborative sense. And I think not necessarily the problem with academia. I think it's definitely useful and important, but like, unfortunately, like it can be quite elitist, and like in as much as you're able to develop really incredible solutions and incredible ways of thinking in a really academic or rigorous and academic way, like those sort of skills and insights aren't necessarily transferable in corporate or in industry or in a way that is useful for people, I would say. So yeah, I definitely agree with that poll that corporate is probably where it's seen its most sort of growth and interest.
Brilliant. And I guess, I mean, the learning kind of starts in academia, but you really build it up when you go into corporate and you address real issues that are happening out there and solving real problems. So yeah, very interesting. And moving over to Thabelo, would you like to give us an introduction to who you are and just tell us what is conversational commerce? And when do you start implementing AI with conversational commerce?
So I'm Mmbengeni and I'm the CTO of FinChatbot. So yeah, my background is basically software development, software architecture. So yeah, that's basically my kind of background in tech. So yeah, so I just want to talk about like a conversational commerce. I think what is conversational commerce? I think when we are looking at conversational commerce, we are looking at direct communication between brands or businesses and the customers. So if we are looking at businesses like Amazon that have built tools like Alexa after they've been operating through call centers, and also other chatting systems into like to basically amplify their commercials and selling like their products all over the world. So just one interesting thing in terms of like the growth of like businesses with conversational commerce, we can see how Amazon has built its like $1 billion business in terms of like doing direct communication. You need to know when to do direct communication. you need to know when to use a system to do like simple chats with the customers, or maybe some sort of like a tool that can that you can it's almost hands free in terms of like listening to your commands. We are all aware of like a tool called Alexa from Amazon that can literally take your orders uh, from your voice, and then your order will directly be delivered to your door without you having to touch any device. So that proves the ability of businesses to grow in terms of like putting different infrastructures in terms of communication between the consumers and the business. So uh, just one interesting thing also, just to highlight here, a lot of people, we have like this fear of like technology will come in, it's gonna replace people's jobs and all that stuff. But so far, I think we're still a little bit far, because if you think about Amazon itself has like lots and lots of automation behind like the scenes in terms of like selling their commercial products. But if you check their call centers all around the world, it's still massive, it's huge. But there are places where the business needs to identify where do we start using artificial intelligence. So that is the big question that each and every business needs to ask themselves. So how do we apply AI? Do we just replace the call centers? Do we just have AI for specific products in the business? So now the big question that comes is, when do we start implementing AI within our businesses to improve our sales, um, and also have better communication with customers, because one of the important things is like communicating with your customers is very important to understand what what are what are the pros and cons, or things that the customers are literally struggling with in terms of like purchasing or interacting with the business on an overall level. So when do we start implementing AI? So one of the things that in commercial, just to name the top four, I mean, there's like the list is massive, it's huge. There's like a variation of AI implementations in terms of like business intelligence, automation, you name it. The list goes on, and the list is increasing by day in terms of like improving the commercials in terms of AI. Um, and the previous poll that shows that a lot of businesses um, they are actually using AI, because it's also easier to adopt in the businesses today. So in terms of like the top four that I kind of like took from my research is processing order faster. People like things to be done faster. I mean, if we're talking about if we look at a at a model that has worked for over the years before AI, we're looking at McDonald's. People prefer McDonald's because you can order your burger like in like in 2 minutes, and then the burger is already done. So this is one of the psychologists that actually proves that ordering things faster is much more important. It's like much more important in the business. So AI can do that much faster. Personalized offers. I mean, these days everyone has experienced like the ads online. They are much more personalized. They are much more targeted to what you want. The utilization of cookies, providing you with products that you really need. The human experience is still very important in terms of like communicating, because no matter how much we can upload AI, we still have like certain kind of like challenges in terms of AI. Um, um, uh, so we just need to kind of where do we draw the do we draw the line between AI and like a kind of a human experience in terms of like giving support and personalizing products. So that's why in tech, like we also have like a say like something called it's called handover protocols. It's even implemented by Facebook, whereby if the bot doesn't know how to process certain information, you can always hand it over to an actual human. And another thing which is like very important is customer support. Without customer support, businesses don't survive. So the AI can assist in terms of like providing 24/7 customer support. Say for example, you are experiencing issues with whatever system, or you want to purchase like whatever item, like Sunday in midnight, you can have like support in terms of uh, purchasing whatever you want to purchase, or not even purchasing, but just getting information on certain products that you want in that commercial space. So that's the part where we can start implementing AI to improve our commercials. So yeah, just to not take more time, I think that's it from my side. Thanks. Over to you, Krystle.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tabs. I think you're absolutely right. We're kind of now living in a society where people like things to be instant. And often, if they aren't instant, they may quickly move on to another company or another solution because they immediately want a result. So, yeah, quite important. We did share a poll while you were talking, and we asked, what is the goal of AI? And most people, 67%, responded that it's to make the work of being human by automating tasks. So as you said, it's not necessarily to take people's jobs, but to automate more of the repetitive types of things so that people can focus on different components where they can, add more value and more intelligence and things like that. So it's definitely to make life a bit easier. So the next question that I have, and it's open for discussion, and I think we'll start with Julien. Maybe Julien, could you maybe give us an example of how you have seen AI be implemented successfully?
I mean, in everything that we seeing every day, I wouldn't want to speak about Siri. I wouldn't want to speak about the new Amazon delivery, but then in terms of South Africa, AI has been used in the Western Cape with in a company called Aerobotics, where they basically use the vision to basically tell the state of your different vegetables. And it's basically very interesting, using nice computer vision techniques and embedded into drones. Then they can basically tell someone that owns a very large land of vegetables, the state of each and every trees that we can find there. So that's a very, very nice use of it in the real world in South Africa. I mean, that's just one example.
Awesome. And I think that kind of brings to mind, I saw that anti-poaching, they're using a lot of AI to help with the poaching issue, which is an incredible positive use of it there. And I think, Kerryn, you did kind of briefly touch on the ethics in AI and to use it for, positive things. Kerryn, can you give us an example of how you've seen AI implemented successfully?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess my favorite sort of like AI project, which is ongoing, is by a group called Masakane. I'm not too sure if people know about it. If not, it's really, really great. They're doing such important work. Essentially, what they're doing is they're trying to use NLP or machine translation to essentially, one, create like a corpus of data for African specific languages, and then get it to essentially use machine learning and specific kinds of NLP tools to then translate that in a meaningful way. And I think that's really, really important, because a large part of this continent and the people of this continent have been excluded from the conversation around AI, even though they're often like the test subjects and the end users of AI. So I think that's a really, really important sort of like for us, by us kind of instantiation of something that is important and useful. So that's definitely my favorite one. Yeah, that's definitely my favorite one.
Brilliant. I think that's really interesting. And then maybe Thabelo, maybe you can share some challenges that you have encountered with AI, or even challenges that you think we will encounter in future.
Yeah, thanks, Krystle. So I think the challenges in AI is collecting data, and and I mean data classification is it can become messy. Sometimes you need a lot of data that you need to collect. I mean, just just talking about Kerryn is talking about Masakane. They do like super like language translation, and then I mean we have communications with Masakane around like what is it? Because in terms of like translating African languages, I think this is like a huge challenge in our in AI, because we need to collect data, and translation is not easy in Africa because there's like so many ways to say things. It's not like a direct translation doesn't always work. You can lose context, you can lose grammar just by doing a direct translation. So I think these are the challenges that we're experiencing now. And on our side, I mean, as Fin Chatbot, we work closely with companies that are doing customer support. We are selling products with chatbots. So we do implement like multi-language, and one of the challenges there is data collection, and literally you need kind of like linguistics in terms of like the translation of like African languages. And also like the most challenge you find that in English things are simple, but in Africa, like you find that even in my language is Venda. So the way you talk with an older person and a young person, it's not the same, even though you're saying the same thing. So you don't want to have that persona that might disrespect a person, even if it's a bot. Because yeah, I think that is like very important, and we need that's like a challenge that we are facing now, and we are still going to face in the future for quite some time.
Sure, that's very interesting. I think, I mean, even looking at, I think most businesses, you have a database that you've been building over a really long time, and there's even, you know, issues with that data in terms of, you know, missing a number on a cell phone or a letter and an email address, and things kind of bounce back, and even fixing that data is a challenge in itself. So then you start adding, you know, gathering conversational and linguistic and all those elements, that becomes quite complex. I would love to hear your thoughts on that, Julien, in terms of, you know, the difficulty in gathering that data and starting to structure it so you can draw intelligence.
Okay, the difficulty in collecting the data, yes, there's like Thabelo said, they can be contextual issues, but then based on where we are in Africa, in languages, we have different languages, we have similar languages, and a lot of things can happen. We need the people that will actually do that. But then that's fine. It's about hurting some people based on what they read or what they heard. Now there's ethics in terms of computer vision, because I forgot to tell about my background. I'm basically specialized in computer vision in my research, and it's very difficult to now build things like facial recognition, voice recognition, and things like that. So we can collect as much data as we want, but then now today, because we can do that, there are so many restrictions about doing that. So I would fold it into two: the lack of data, for example, in Africa, and the abundance of data somewhere else. But then we have like ethical issues that can stop people from actually doing this type of activities. So that's basically my point of that on the difficulties of gathering the data. As we have it, we have restrictions on that. But if we don't have it, where can we find it? Who will do that? How can we clean it? It's like, a very long process of actually acquiring this type of knowledge.
Yep, quite difficult. And, maybe when people start projects, they can think of that data gathering structure ahead of starting these big projects, so, that it starts on the right track. Because going back into historical data, like for your computer vision research, I'm sure is quite difficult to get all the right information that you need. So yeah, that's very interesting. And Kerryn, from your side, what types of challenges have you encountered with AI, and maybe can you provide an example of how you're trying to solve that?
Sure, cool. So I guess there's a very clear theme, and I love it, and it's always just an ethics chat. So that's been a really big one, both like professionally and then also like sort of personally, is trying to sort of like reconcile some like normative ethics or applied ethics within the current context of like AI, and that's always really difficult. So my experience with like trying to apply like an ethical lens to AI, specifically machine learning and deep learning, is you have a set of data, or you have an algorithm in question, and what is the best way in which to de-bias that, especially when the end user is a human. And so my context has mainly been in the context of, wow, I said context a bunch of times. We should start a drinking game. It's been in the context of like credit risk, which in many ways is meant to be an enabler of financial inclusion, even though that's often not what it does. It creates a lot of generational debt trauma. But now, because banks are trying to move away from like statistical learning models into machine learning models and sometimes deep learning models, because there's quite a black boxiness element to that, it means that you can't necessarily interrogate why you got an outcome that you did. And even though that there are like protections in place in terms of you can't use like race, gender, other sort of things as explicit variables, there are proxies for those things, right? Like there's area, there's income, there's all sorts of other things. And unless we're being incredibly clear upfront before we start the model building process or the problem statement or anything like that, unless we're super clear, like who's sort of like humanity are we prioritizing here, and why, and what is it that we're going to do, just given the systemic inequalities of this country. I think that's been a really sort of difficult conversation to have, because it also presupposes that everyone is on the sort of like same, everyone shares the same opinion that you do when it comes to ethics and how things should be governed. And now it's just down to like, cool, how do we build this debiasing model? And that's often not the case. So that's definitely been a big one. But yeah, I guess sort of the work that I've done and my larger kind of vocational interests look at specifically using other AI models to either I guess unpack or interpret or audit pre-existing models, or it's going to be in the context of like the data is skewed, and so what are the ways in which you can upsample, downsample, or do things differently to give a more sort of like robust and coherent picture of what's going on given the problem statement. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yep. So I remember a talk that was given by Plenemy a while back.
Yeah, she is incredible. Love her.
I think we definitely need to do a talk with Plenemy. So yeah, and she focuses a lot on that ethics side. And it's actually a massive topic on its own. There's so many different components of it, and understanding that needs to happen there. It's a difficult space. From what you showed us, Kerryn, in terms of, kind of you've got your deep learning, and then the outer layer is your machine learning, and then your AI. If you had to have a debate where someone says AI is machine learning or AI is not machine learning, how would you kind of address that question?
I mean, I guess I would respectfully but vehemently disagree, because one is just a tool, whereas the other is an entire school of thought. I'm trying to think of an appropriate sort of like anecdote. Okay, I don't have one right now, but yeah, literally like machine learning in and of itself doesn't have like a whole bunch of thinking to it. Like all the thinking and cool, sexy, and like innovative things that happen are as a result of like AI, which is the larger sort of like discipline. And so I think it's definitely appropriate to say that like, hang on, I'm getting my Venn diagram confused. Yeah, I think it's appropriate to say that like machine learning is necessarily AI, but I don't think that the converse of that is true, just because AI sort of encompasses like a wide range of things. Yeah, but let me know who wants to debate this. I'm keen, I'm ready.
Feel free to use the Q&A section. We've got our Q&A coming up. I haven't seen any questions yet. So if you would like to know more or challenge that, let's do it. And then maybe for you, Thabelo, I mean, I know you focus a lot on the conversational commerce side of things. You know, at what point do you look at implementing AI or bringing AI to life? Is it sort of an immediate thing, or when does that happen, and what is the benefit of it for conversational commerce?
Yeah, so I think it's all about studying, like you need to study the market. You need to understand what the market is. You also need to understand what is the product. You also need to understand what are the offerings your client is basically providing. I mean, we are in the financial space. We liaise with banks, telecommunications. I mean, telecommunications these days are now becoming financial institutions. I mean, if you take a company like MTN, I mean, they are offering like financial products. Vodacom, they also launched like financial products. So telecoms are now becoming like financial products. So you, if you think about like those kind of like clients in that space or businesses in that space, the communication changes depending on the product that they are offering, and the approach also. You need to study first before you even apply artificial intelligence. How was the business interacting with those clients to begin with, and what are the challenges that those clients have been facing with before you even think about like applying a tool? Then you need to find a balance. Do you thoroughly use AI and then just say, imagine if you just go to maybe a telecommunication website, and then you find a chatbot, and the chatbot just asks you, how can I help you? And then you just ask, I'm having a headache. Like it's like it's kind of a little bit ambiguous for the bot, because now even though maybe we can try to derive context from your question, from the user's question, what we need to understand is how quickly can you resolve something that a user is starting with a question that is so broad, not really specific to what they really want. So it's gonna take so long. So in terms of like speeding things up, you need to have some sort of like guidance. You need to guide the users. I mean, we are not at a place whereby or a position now whereby our AI is at a position to understand things the way we understand things in terms of business. So yeah, I really think the first thing is to understand the business and what they want to offer, and understand the problems that the customers are facing on that product specifically and that business specifically before you introduce a technology.
I think that's probably pretty responsible. I mean, to first understand the need and the business and everything before you start, you know, applying, you know, tools that are taking you in the wrong direction. So that's fantastic. I see that we don't have any questions. So I think to end off the webinar, maybe we can go around and I think we might have one. If each of you can just give us, let's see, to Julien, to get the data, main source, you want to go to web scraping of direct from those entities. I don't know if you can see that in the chat, Julien.
Yes, I can see the question. To get data, main source, you want to go web scraping of direct. I guess it's all direct from those entities, I guess is that right, instead of, oh, yes. Okay, now it depends. When you say web scraping, that's very specific to a very to an activity. Let's say you'd like to collect stuff from a website. Then you build a bot that basically pulls that data from there. But again, the data available to you by doing web scraping is the only thing that you see on the page. Getting the data from source is basically the best thing to do, like an API endpoint or a CSV file or any database that you have available instead of getting from the website. Web scraping is a very quick thing to say, maybe, for example, from Google Images, scrape everything from there. Or let's say Property 24. I would like to get images of houses, Property 24, then you can scrape the website about those images, and then you'll win. But if you want to have more accurate data, the best thing to do is always go to the source. But sometimes the source can be not free. So that's your balance or your threshold, depending on what you want to do. But then there's no right or wrong answer. It depends on what you have available and what you want to do with it.
Awesome, thank you. We do have one question that says, what are the data limitations you are seeing in corporate data sets? I feel like there are lots of imported views on commerce and data, e.g. LSMs, which may not apply as well to the nuances of the local market. What are some of the challenges that you've seen, and how are you looking at these challenges? Maybe we can start with you, Kerryn, on this one.
Sure, cool. Yeah, it's a dope question. So honestly, look, I think, I'm not too sure how to say this name. Diesel? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Cool, so I guess, and again, maybe just to reference sort of like credit risk, but like, because a lot of the sort of academic understanding or theoretical understanding of credit risk is largely imported from like the UK and the way in which that they do things and their banking regulations. And it's sort of been like adapted for South Africa. I do think that there are a lot of assumptions that have been made in terms of that like risk reward sort of like metric / balancing act that doesn't necessarily hold true in South Africa, simply because like structure inequality looks different here, debt trauma here looks a little bit different here. And so I think there are a lot of like financial services products that are being offered that don't necessarily fulfill an appropriate sort of demand, right? So even I think like personal loans is a really good sort of way to think about it. Like the personal loans product offering should have a lot more nuance than what it currently does. The fact that like stokvels make up such a large part of the sort of, yeah, I guess financial kind of stratosphere of this country, but it's not firmly embedded in banking, is maybe good because banks don't know what exactly to do with it, and I think would be opportunistic if they were to try and, you know, capitalize on that market. But it does mean that there's a large portion of people who are just necessarily disenfranchised because the ways in which we understand banking and banking regulations don't make a whole lot of sense here. I also have no idea what LSMs are. So SOZ can't speak to that, but yeah, 100% agree that no, it definitely does not speak to the local market. And I think even that, right, like that's also an important thing to critique, because like there are a variety of like people who make, or groups who make up this country, and oftentimes even when we're thinking about the local market, and if the local market that is being prioritized is like the dominant sort of Nguni tribe, it also means that like other groups are being left out of those conversations, and like why is that the case, right? So I think it's very much about like who is front and center of these conversations, and again, like whose interests, ethics, etc. are being prioritized. So yeah, so definitely those are the challenges. In terms of how you are looking at it, so how I am looking at those challenges, these things are tricky, right? If you're not in management and privy to big picture thinking and big picture conversations, it's really difficult to do anything outside of just like the basic sort of like, well, not basic, simple, non-trivial debiasing algorithms and trying to do one's best in meetings and stuff like that. I do, however, know that like, at least in banking, because it's got a relatively sort of like oligarchical kind of structure to it, if one bank is really trying to like do the most and be great, but the other banks aren't following suit, it doesn't mean very much, right? And so I think for as long as people are loud on social media and really trying their best to like hold banks responsible for just doing banana things, I do think that creates some sort of like momentum and gets banks to move in a way that is hopefully better. I hope that answered your question. If not, please feel free to hit me up.
So we've got one more. Thanks, Kerryn. That was actually extremely interesting. We've also got another question from the issue of context explained. Does it mean while using NLP, some meaning might be lost? Am I right? Just a comment from Nansela, if I've pronounced that correctly.
Who is the question for?
Maybe I think for you, Kerryn, maybe just to clarify from your last points.
Sure. So look, NLP is definitely not my area of expertise, but so and if I'm understanding the question correctly, from the context explained doesn't mean that while using. So I get, if I'm understanding it correctly, you're speaking to like linguistic meaning. So like if you're trying to do a one-for-one pairing of like, what does this word mean in like Tshivenda versus in English, but because like there's a lot of like lyricism that's attached to Tshivenda or even Sesotho or whatever, you might not even get the full sort of nuance and understanding in English. I think that's what you mean. And if that is what you mean, then yes, 100%. But then it comes back to like, you need to have like people who actually speak that language conversationally and understand it conversationally, right? To then understand that nuance. And two, you probably also need to have like linguists who are part of that conversation because they understand the ways in which language works in a much more technical sort of fashion. And so, so data scientists and AI practitioners are definitely not the only ones who can be doing that sort of, and should not be doing that sort of work. Let me know if I've missed your question there.
Just to add on to what Kerryn said, NLP usually, if you look at the latest version of the natural language processing components like BERT or GPT-3, those things are meant to understand and go deeper than just doing a one-to-one comparisons. Like today, English language is very well established. So we know like when a word is given, and then a couple of other words are also surrounding that word, we understand the meaning of it. But then, when it comes to African language, the Mmbengeni project is just to make sure that this, what you just explicitly said here, should be solved. Again, in Africa, we have multiple languages, also in India, I guess, which are for word-to-word or direct translation can actually destroy the meaning of the sentence and create a war even. So yes, this project is going on. It's something on the way. Currently, some meanings are very lost. You're right on saying that, but we're building onto it. We're building onto it, and NLP in our continent is growing, and we're trying to make sure that we carry as much context as we can as we go further with that particular area of machine learning.
Awesome, thank you so much. And I think from the sounds of it, linguists, this is a big job, up and coming, lots of opportunities. So little bit of a tip maybe. So we have come to the end of the webinar, and I think there's quite a lot of different interesting points that we've picked up during the chat. And thank you so much for sharing your time with us and sharing your insights. And yeah, if anybody wants to know more, feel free. You can email me at hello@finchatbot.com, and I'll put you in touch with whoever you'd like to talk to, or if it's me, I'll help you as best I can. And I'd like to wish everybody a fantastic day.